Hey everybody, I'm Hamsack, and today I am going to be talking about Diablo 4. The beta came out last weekend, and they're launching the open beta for everybody to access this weekend. So, I'm going to talk about kind of my experience with the early access beta, just sort of setting expectations and stuff like that. Let's get started. So, with this new game, they're kind of going in a direction of an MMO sort of style with an open world and different players to interact with. You can interact with these different players in town during events that happen throughout the world using either the chat window or the emote wheel. Using this emote wheel, you can, emote, but you can also use this to open up portals or leave dungeons. In this beta, you only level up to level 25, but as you're leveling up through this area, the monsters will scale with you. So I'm not sure in the full game if there will be a cap on the scaling for each zone. I hope there will be, but there might not be. So it might be kind of weird to eventually maybe see, level 4 characters slicing through enemies like nothing with a level 50, 60, whatever coming through and struggling a little bit. It would probably be a weird situation. So hopefully we see some sort of cap per zone, but we won't know that till the full game releases, I guess. There are also these statues you can find all over the place. There's 28 of them. They're called Lilith statues. They will add permanent buffs to your account. These can range from like stat points to even just little things like renown experience. Renown is your new sort of zone reputation where the more objectives and events you complete, the higher your renown level goes. Each time you level up with your renown, you'll gain different rewards like gold or skill points. And the objectives can range from things like public events that you can do with other players that just anybody can do who's nearby, as well as dungeons and strongholds, but I'll go over those later. The side quests can also be found other places, but mostly in towns. They are unlocked as your character levels up. Most of the side quests are pretty easy. They're just, quick and simple. Go kill a few guys, go find an item, go emote at a tree, stuff like that. But some of them will send you to complete dungeons and stuff. This is something that I found that was kind of odd, just because the dungeons are available as soon as you find them in the world. Instead of unlocking them through the side quest, like you would imagine, you can actually complete the dungeon first and then find the side quest that takes you to the dungeon you already did. So I feel like if they're going to have side quests relate to dungeons, maybe have the side quest unlock the dungeon at least the first time through. Or another thing I think might work is just to maybe auto-complete certain quests if they're related to dungeons that you've already done. But that might not work because usually the side quests require you to kill a specific enemy inside the dungeon. So that might not work, but maybe something along those lines. So let's talk about dungeons. This is the content that I'm more concerned with than basically anything else in the game. The reason for this is because all of the dungeons are very similar. They basically just have two different mechanics. Not two mechanics total, one mechanic or the other. So the first one is you have to find all the enemies and kill them. You have to kill every enemy. So that means if there's a skeleton that's hiding in some far off room, who knows where, you have to go find it and kill it. That's sort of annoying and can take up a lot of time. Number 2, the only other mechanic that I was able to find in these dungeons was There's a boss door, and there are two keys to open the boss door. Either they're objects or two items to interact with, whatever. You just gotta go find them, and typically they're on complete opposite sides of the map. So you have to basically backtrack the whole map, this whole dungeon, like twice sometimes, and it's super dumb. Like it's just boring. You just run there, run back, and then run there, run back, and then you fight the boss. It's just not super enjoyable. However, the atmosphere and the environment is awesome. It definitely feels really cool to go into one of these dungeons and see just an amazing environment. Everything's super detailed, and even in the open world it's super detailed. But even though these dungeons look good, they may just run into problems with monotony and just stuff like that, because you'll be running into the same patterns over and over again. Not to mention that the bosses are also repeats. They're just kind of copy pasted throughout the dungeons. There's only a couple of dungeons here or there that really had unique bosses, or maybe I just maybe I just didn't do another dungeon with that same boss. I don't know, but the enemy itself looks really cool and has really cool looking abilities. But some of the bosses are kind of awful. They have mechanics that are very difficult to handle as melee, or just any character at all, because one of the enemies, this sort of blood creature, has this attack that will grab onto you, stun you, and just keep stunning you and hurting you for like a really long time. It's like a full 5 seconds or something like that, and it'll take out almost all of your health, if not all of it, and kill you. So it's just really a terrible fight. At least that move in particular. Besides that, there's other enemies, other bosses that will drop pools of damaging or crowd control, stunning, freezing effects right on their lap. So as a melee character, you have no choice but to fight in the pool of death that they leave. It's kind of just a terrible thing for melee characters, and really unfortunate. So hopefully they have some way of changing that and making it a little bit more forgiving. After running through the way too many dungeons that are repeated and have the same bosses, you should try out the strongholds. The strongholds are actually more difficult, and they have way better boss fights and more complicated mechanics that are actually more interesting than the dungeons. But sadly, once you've completed one of these strongholds and you've lit the little shrine or whatever, they become something else.
Something else? I don't know what this is.
You're not able to do these strongholds again if they turn into a town. I believe 2 of them turn into towns. So it's kind of unfortunate. But the other one does turn into a more public event that you can go to and complete with other people. So that one you can sort of do more often, but definitely one of them turns into a town. You can't repeat it anymore. It's kind of a bummer. It was, for me, this one was actually kind of one of the cooler ones, because it felt more like you were involved in what was going on, because the whole town is like hiding from you, and then you go into this church, and then they turn on you, and you're like, oh no, this was so unexpected, and then you go back through the town and kill all the bad guys. So it's actually a really cool stronghold. Now that was probably one of my favorite ones out of the 3. The bosses are sort of difficult. One of them for me was the most difficult, just because it was this freezing guy who just puts a bunch of freezing stuff all over the place, and it's a small arena, so you have to kind of be careful with your movement. But I wish strongholds were more repeatable. It seems kind of odd that they just you're just not able to do them anymore. So I hope that changes. I hope there's a way to maybe there's an event where the enemy takes over the village or whatever again, and the town, and you can take it back, That'd be kind of cool. Maybe it's a weekly, every 2 weeks, something like that, some sort of event. I think that'd be kind of cool to be able to give us a chance to recapture the town. If you're looking for some really difficult content and, well, sort of more difficult content, and also some content that's more repeatable, then I suggest going and hunting down the world boss, Ashava. This is the only world boss that's available in the beta. It's located over here in this location on the far right of the map on this frozen lake. The unfortunate thing about this boss is instead of, how it probably should be, where it spawns every 3 hours, every 4 hours, something like that, so you can be more aware of the times that it spawns. Instead, they have very specific times that it spawns. They're kind of odd. On Saturday at 10 a.m., 12 p.m., 10 p.m., and then a final spawn at midnight, 12 a.m. on Sunday. That's when you'll be able to actually fight this boss. It's kind of just a really weird spawn times. It's kind of inconvenient for I feel like most people, but note that these spawn times are Pacific time, so adjust accordingly for your time zone. This is really unfortunate because I was only able to fight the boss one time this last weekend, and it was probably the most enjoyable thing in the whole beta. It was so much fun. It wasn't extremely difficult because as soon as you die from the boss, you spawn just a few feet away and can jump back in. So it wasn't super difficult, but it was super fun. There was a few different mechanics that the boss jumps around, moves around all over this frozen lake, and you follow it around. You avoid these pools of stuff that it drops of poison on the ground. You avoid its claw. Here's a note though. To avoid its claw, if you see it sweeping, move close to the boss, as close as possible to the boss, so that can kind of guarantee you to not get hit by the sweeping claw. But if you're a sorcerer, you can just stand way far away and just use hydras to kill it. If you have what it takes and you think that you can stand up to this world boss, pretty much you can. It's not super difficult. You can still just go try it, deal some damage, and get some loot. So I suggest definitely go try it out. Even if you don't think you're super up to the challenge, just go have some fun. But if you want to make sure you're doing the most damage and can be the most powerful you can be to fight this world boss, you'll want to kind of come up with a build. You want to kind of move your skills and your armor around to make just a super powerful character, right? So this is where classes come in. For early access, beta, whatever it was last weekend, we had access to 3 classes out of the total 5 that we will have access to in this coming weekend. We had access to the Barbarian, the Rogue, and the Sorcerer. I picked the Rogue just so that way I could have kind of a feel for both melee and ranged combat. And my friend who was playing couch co-op with me was playing as the Sorcerer. The skill trees are fairly basic. There are a few different categories, and you can pick from a few of them, and you unlock more parts of the tree as you level up and distribute your points. You might see all of these new vocabulary words that will take you back to 3rd grade when you had to memorize all those vocabulary words. Well, now they're way more complicated and have more specific uses to the game. And if you want to find these definitions or descriptions, you can just hover over the skill, click on the skill, whatever you gotta do, and at the very bottom of the skill description, you'll see a definition for the specific vocabulary word. If you're not finding it here, you can also try going to your character menu and opening up the little side menu and checking your stats. Underneath your stats, you might find a different or a more specific definition for those same vocabulary words. Whatever you gotta do, you check both of those. If you're not finding them there, I don't know. It's a beta. Hopefully they'll add more descriptions or a better place to figure out what's going on. What's really nice about these skill trees is you're able to redistribute your points pretty much whenever you want, as long as you pay a small gold fee. So this was really helpful because then as a rogue, I was able to mix and match my build all over the place. Something that was sort of unfortunate about these skill trees was that some of the nodes seemed practically useless. There were definitely some nodes that and skills and stuff that you wanted to click on over others. There's a lot of them that just didn't seem to have that big of an impact. And then there were also, for me as a rogue, pretty much all of the ultimates, none of them dealt enough damage to make up for the insane cooldown it had on there. But we do only get to see up to level 25. And Paragon isn't even introduced until level 50. And those charts are insane. So hopefully we'll get to see what those are like soon. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll get to see them in the beta, but we should be able to see them pretty soon after the beta. Once you get your skills and sort of your playstyle figured out, you can go and talk to the blacksmith. They'll give you a bunch of weapon upgrades. There's 5 upgrades that you can get, and the higher they are, the better they are. Next, you'll want to talk to the occultist, because the occultist will extract legendary affixes for you, and you'll be able to redistribute those affixes onto other items, other legendary items, or even rare items. The occultist also lets you switch out different perks and stats and stuff on your items, so that way you're able to get more specific with what you want. The scary thing is, though, how high of a price it is, and each time you switch out a perk or stat or anything like that, the price gets bigger, just the same as your skill did, your skill replacement thing did. After that, you'll want to make your way over to the jeweler, because they let you put sockets into any item. Well, most items, not any item, but some items you can put multiple sockets into, and they also let you upgrade your different gems into even better gems, and they also upgrade your jewelry too. So I guess we'll talk more about the items themselves. The rarity is pretty similar to a lot of other games, right? It's, common, then magic, rare, legendary, white, blue, yellow, orange, right? So the legendary items are more rare, but aren't incredibly rare. I hear in the full release we'll be able to get more unique items, which will be way more rare and have more of an impact on our build. Legendary items have affixes. The affixes are able to be transferred around, placed onto other legendary or even rare items. These affixes can also be found in dungeons. Just by itself, you'll be able to add these affixes to a giant pool of other affixes that you're able to draw from and use at the occultist. Rare items have 3 perks on them, 3 stats on them, as well as a little tiny bonus on some armor. In the full release, I hear that there's going to be up to 5 stats or perks on a rare item, which will actually be super cool and be more of an incentive to transfer legendary items or legendary affixes to rare items. So after a lot of work, we're able to create sort of a build. We're able to compile all of our stuff into something that actually makes sense. And this is where I'm going to talk about the big differences between range and melee classes and styles in the beta so far. As a melee character, you have a lot to worry about. Some sort of stun, freeze, slow, whatever. It seems like there are way too many of those. So that makes it very difficult as a melee character, because you are constantly having to run around and jump and avoid everything all the time. So that makes it so your DPS is struggling quite a bit, especially during boss fights. And if there are big groups, you can get hit by a CC, crowd control, and be stunned for a second, and then everybody just hits you and you die. Or if you're lucky enough, you can just spam the potion button and hope that your CC breaks before you die, and then you can hurry and dodge out of there. But your dodge isn't super consistent. The thing is, I feel like the dodge should sort of break animations, sort of cancel some animations with your skills, just so that way you can easily dodge out of the way of things that are coming at you. Because sometimes you would get stunned and then dodge rather than being able to dodge right away. It was sort of unfortunate and kind of annoying, but hopefully this is something that can get fixed pretty quickly. Not only do you have CCs to worry about, but obviously I talked about before how bosses would spawn pools of death right at their feet and make it impossible for melee characters to survive. You just have to hit them as much as you can. Hopefully you have some sort of way to heal yourself through the damage and still be able to deal damage to the boss. Otherwise, you're just running around all over the place trying to avoid these pools of death, which ends up taking away from your DPS and makes it so the boss fight just takes even longer. An enemy that I ran into a lot that did a ton of CCs that was really annoying was this ice shaman, and pretty much every shot they hit you with, it froze you, and so it was super annoying. And they're a ranged enemy, so you had to chase them down, and the closer you got to them, if you got frozen when you were close to them, they'd just run away, and it was super annoying. Another enemy that I ran into was the red ghost archers. They have kind of a super attack that they use that has a very short window of reaction time. So you attack, but you can't break your animation with your dodge, so then you get hit with it, and then you dodge, and now your dodge is wasted. So that enemy was kind of frustrating because there was a lot of times where I would waste my dodge or my dashes, whatever. I'm not too worried about those, but what did I do to kind of avoid all of these crazy things that I had to deal with during the beta as a melee character? Well, this is kind of how my build went. I would have to crowd control as often as possible using my smoke bomb. After I smoke bomb them, they'd get stunned, and I'd be able to jump in, use flurry. Hopefully, at this point, I would have enough critical hit chance to turn some of them, if not all of them, vulnerable. This would make it so I would boost my damage with flurry again, and I'd be able to do more critical hits, and also because they were vulnerable, and I had some other critical hit bonuses in my passives, it gave me health back when I would deal critical hits, and damage to vulnerable people. So it was a lot of stuff to just try to keep myself alive. But then to deal damage, I would also throw in shadow imbue thing for bonus damage on those groups. I could probably make it work for bosses if I just move some stuff around, but this was mainly stuff I would use on big groups. My friend, on the other hand, was using a sorcerer, and it seemed like he had a much easier time figuring out a build for himself, because it seemed like it was a lot more simple. Have an ability to defend yourself with, like a barrier shield or like a frost nova to freeze everybody around you, stuff like that. And then just dump everything into fire damage and use 2 abilities. One, just so you could deal some damage, and 2 was the Hydra. The Hydra is crazy overpowered, it seems like, because you can place it in rooms that you're not even in, and it will deal damage to enemies for you. So you don't really have to do a whole lot. And then he also did Incinerate. It was another ability he used, and just dumped a bunch of damage into that, so he could just deal bonus damage. So for him, it wasn't too much of survivability that he needed to worry about. it was how much damage I can deal. Whereas as a melee character, it seemed like a lot of my focus was how do I get my health back because I'm dying super fast. What I'm getting at is hopefully Blizzard does some sort of class balancing stuff when this game comes out, because as of right now, there is not a large incentive to play a melee class besides the challenge factor. So hopefully they do some class balancing and some stat balancing here and there to make it so more play styles are viable. Something I forgot to mention though, another vendor you can find in the capital city is this person. So if you're having a hard time finding specific items, you can talk to this person down here to trade obols, something like that. I don't know the currency name. I don't remember how to pronounce it. I don't know. But you could trade that currency for a random item of a specific item slot. So if you're needing a new sword, a new weapon, a new boots, you can specifically pick that out and get that to hopefully you'll get something good out of that. That's a lot more information than you probably really need going into the beta this weekend, but hopefully that gives you kind of a step into seeing where we're going for Diablo 4. But if you really want to see, just go into the beta, find out for yourself. Just know that the the game is very forgiving. It's basically as complicated as you want to make it. If you want to make this really complicated build, you might do a little bit better and you might have a little bit more fun, depending on if that's your thing. If you want to have a simple build, simple abilities, simple armor, you might not do super well. You might not do a ton of damage. But what's nice is this is sort of turning into an MMO where you can invite friends, play with other people, stuff like that. So you're not alone, and you'll be able to probably complete more content, even if you're not super invested, I guess would be a way to say it. Let me kind of wrap this up, kind of break things down a little bit. What needs work? Well, some of the ultimate skills and other skill tree stuff just didn't seem to be super impactful, and especially the ultimate skills didn't seem good enough for the massive cooldown that it had. Class balancing definitely can use some work, especially being that the sorcerer is far and above the better class for right now, at least. We'll see, maybe the druid or the necromancer will be even more ridiculous, but as of right now, the sorcerer is kind of the way to go. The new dodge ability probably needs a little bit of work, so that way it doesn't not work when it's supposed to, or it doesn't work when it's not supposed to. The dungeons need to be far less forgettable and repetitive. They need to be more replayable. Strongholds should probably be replayable content in some way. Either I know some of them are replayable because they turn into events, but I wish that all of them were in some way replayable. Besides those big things, even though those aren't really like big things, they're just concerns that, should be considered by the developers because they could be pretty impactful on the gameplay if they're not careful. But besides that, there were just a couple of things. I mean, it's a beta, so these might be fixed by now too. There's a bunch of invisible walls in this dungeon, and it's called the Black Asylum or something like that. And obviously, it's a beta, that they're having some server issues, so hopefully that stuff kind of gets worked out. We'll see. But that's pretty much all I saw that really needed to be fixed or needed some work. Hopefully you guys aren't getting the misconception that I'm hating on the game or anything like that. I just really want to see this game succeed because I had so much fun with this beta. It was only 3 days and it was incredibly disappointing that I wasn't able to play it more, but I will get to play it more this weekend, and then I'll have to wait a few months to play the full thing, which is sort of suckish. But I love this game. This game is super fun. There was a few things that were sort of meh that could be fixed, like I was mentioning. But these are the things that feel really good. The game looks amazing. There is so much detail. You can even draw whatever you want in the snow. Or but there's also animals frolicking around. There's leaves blowing around and stuff like that. The story, I know I didn't really talk about the story. That's because I really didn't pay too much attention. I'm kind of holding off on the story stuff until the full release because I want to focus more in the beta on a lot of the systems, right? The small systems, more exploration, figuring out the classes, how they feel. That's my main focus. The story is kind of secondary because it's not like they can do anything about changing the story. They're already this far into it. I doubt that they wouldn't be able to change the story, so any feedback there would be practically pointless. So the story, from what I saw, the cinematics I saw, it was pretty good. It looked great, and I'm excited to actually experience it when the full game comes out. The gameplay and like the skills and everything just felt so good. The skills and your combat and everything was so raw and impactful, and it just made you feel super powerful after combining all of your builds and your weapons and your armor together to create this powerful wrecking machine. It just felt so good, and it was awesome. I loved feeling that, and I feel that way. I felt that way in other Diablo games. So they really do a good job at that, and I wasn't too worried about that, to be honest, going into this. The open world felt awesome. Having all of the other people around didn't really change a whole lot, except for it made it more alive. Like having those players join into the events, fight bosses with you, stuff like that. Just it felt really good, and you could really team up and felt like you were saving the world because you had friends with you, and you could help each other out. If you get stuck on quests, you could just be like, hey, there'd be a guy running past, be like, hey, do you know what to do? And they could help you. It was really cool to be able to have that kind of support system, as well as just a living, breathing world that you could interact with. It was really cool. The mob density at this level felt pretty good. I imagine the higher levels you go, the more enemies you'll run into. So at this level, it felt pretty good. And besides being sort of a copy paste sort of deal, the dungeons were fun. I really enjoyed fighting the bosses and stuff, and having the enemies around. I did have a good time. The bosses were kind of cool and engaging, and the dungeon experience felt good. It felt good, but I just don't think that it has any sort of longevity. There's no replayability to the dungeons. There's no reason for me to go back more than once. Even for side quests, I didn't really feel like I wanted to go do a dungeon again for a side quest. I just kind of ignored it. Speaking of the side quests felt like an appropriate length and difficulty. They weren't super annoying or hard to find or anything like that. They were pretty obvious. Some of the quests seem pretty similar to quests you would see in like World of Warcraft. So it makes sense, and it's cool. I think they did a good job with the side quests. Obviously, the most important thing is I had fun. I had tons of fun, and this is probably one of the first video game betas I've really been able to participate in. So it was really cool to be able to see this stuff early and be able to give my feedback. So hopefully this feedback was helpful for people. I hope this helps somebody. But I'm just really excited to see what they have in store for the full release of the game. That's pretty much it. So, I mean, to put some things to rest, as far as we've heard, there's no pay to win. That's as far as I've heard. There's no pay to win. There's no real, you don't have to pay monthly for anything. There's just some cosmetic season passes that you can purchase that just give you some random seasonal things, and that free track will give you like some resources. I think that's what they said, is they'd give you some resources, but that's pretty much it. That's all I got. That's a lot, but I'll be playing the Druid this weekend, as well as the Resident Evil 4 release, the remake release. So if you want to check that out, hopefully I'll be streaming it. We'll see what happens, but I'll be having a bunch of videos coming out on both of those, the upcoming beta this weekend and the remake for Resident Evil 4. So come by, check out the channel, look for those videos if you're interested. But I also do tons of reviews on other stuff, tips and tricks videos, stuff like that. So come by, check them out. Hit that little sub button, that little bell if you wanna check out that cool stuff, that awesome hard work I put into that stuff. Otherwise, leave a comment. Tell me what you guys are thinking about this Diablo 4 so far. Is it good? Is it reaching your expectations? Is it unfortunately reaching your expectations? And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Helps me out a ton. And that's pretty much it, guys. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.